Hey guys, we are live. Welcome. Thank you for joining me and hopping on. So if you are watching this on the replay, there will be, oh, actually there won't. Never mind. If you're watching this on the replay, thank you, and feel free to leave a question below the post because I will check back and I will answer, and obviously I'll get notifications, but I'll be able to answer any questions. Even if I'm not live, I'll see them and I'll answer your questions. But if you are on live, feel free to type a question in at any time. Facebook Live video is really great and I'll see your question right away. But today I am here to talk about flavor without onion and garlic. And I think over time, over the whole year, I used to get a lot of questions about what should I eat for lunch. I think that was my most common question for a while. But overall, and especially lately, it's been onion and garlic, onion and garlic. And I know, and I was the same way, when you first learn about the FODMAP diet and you see that you are supposed to eliminate onion and garlic, you wonder how you will live. And that is exactly how I felt. And that's one of the biggest questions I get from people who first find my website and email me and say, I'm struggling with onion and garlic. So finally, and I can't believe it's taken me this long, but finally I'm doing a blog post that is all about answering that question. So I'm calling it the Ultimate Low FODMAP Guide to Flavor Without Onion and Garlic, which is a really long title, but I couldn't really think of a better one. It's like you have to put low FODMAP in there. So I'm kind of giving you a preview right now of what is in my blog post, and it will be on the blog sometime tomorrow, which is Thursday. I really, really hope, but it will be, and I will send you the link in the Friday email newsletter. And if you're not on my email list, you absolutely need to be, because I send things that are not on the blog and all sorts of extras and just content that you won't even find on the blog. The email crew is where it's at, so go to my website and click any of the options to sign up and get a free cheat sheet, and you'll be added to the newsletter list. So let's talk about flavor without onion and garlic, all right? And if you're on here live, feel free to type a question in and I'll see it right away. Okay, so there are little tips, you know, when you learn about the FODMAP diet, maybe you're on Monash or various websites, and they all kind of say the same thing. They say, well, you can replace onion with asafoetida, which is an Indian spice. And I'm gonna go ahead and say, even if it's controversial, I'm gonna say that asafoetida is not worth it. I have been using it for years. Even before I learned about the FODMAP diet, I was really into traditional Indian cooking, and I had all the spices, including that one, and you just use it in these tiny, tiny amounts. And it's just kind of, it works with the other spices. And if you're just adding it to, and let's say an Italian sauce type of a recipe, all by itself as a way to replace onion, it doesn't work the same way as when it's kind of in concert with all those Indian spices. So I really don't think it's worth it unless you're cooking Indian food. I mean, in all honesty, as someone who's tried it and played with it in different ways. So, and you know what? It's hard to figure out, right? You can only use a tiny bit or else stuff starts to sort of stink like overcooked cabbage. So that's the first thing. And I'm not going to be telling you tips that you've heard before. Like, well, one thing I do have is I'll have a video in the blog post of exactly how to prep a leek and what part of a leek you should use. And a leek is a great onion replacer. I think it's actually more flavorful than an onion, and you can get a lot of volume out of a leek. Like if you need a whole cup of onion, you can actually get a cup of leek without having to buy like 20 bundles of scallions. And really the thing with scallions, even though they're great onion replacers, is that they're better when you don't cook them. They're better when you add them at the end of a dish. So those are my little kind of basic tips to sort of clarify what you probably already know. And I'm also not going to tell you in this blog post that you should use herbs and spices, because we all know this, of course. I mean, yes, herbs and spices are fabulous. Basil, rosemary, thyme, tarragon. I have all these things in my garden and I absolutely love them. Spices, chili powder, cumin, coriander, everything else escapes me right now. Ginger, all the dried spices, you know, that we have and that we cook with. Those are flavorful and they're wonderful and they work in concert with other ingredients, but they don't necessarily replace those pungent aromatics, and that's what I consider onion and garlic. So I'm not just going to tell you to cook with herbs and spices, because you need something more. You need something that just explodes with more flavor, and herbs and spices are accents, and they're meant to work with other things in more subtle ways. So my big tip, and what I'm writing about in my blog post that will be live tomorrow, is umami, okay? And you may have heard of it, you may not, doesn't matter, you're gonna learn about it. Umami is the fifth taste. So you know there's salty, sour, sweet, and bitter, and then there's umami. And so at some point in the 20th century, a Japanese scientist isolated this flavor, umami, and translated, it kind of translates to yumminess or deliciousness, so not a great translation, but that's the word, the term he gave it. And he, you know, thought, well, I've found lightning in a bottle here, and he found a way to industrially recreate the umami flavor, and he started producing MSG. So MSG and natural umami are two totally different things. We know a lot of people have allergic reactions to MSG that, you know, kind of similar to any food allergy, and there's not really a lot of it's not fully understood why that happens, but it's something that we like to avoid for that reason. So when I'm talking about umami, I'm talking about foods that naturally contain this flavor. And it's totally healthy, totally good for you. It occurs in a lot of veggies, actually. Asparagus, mushrooms, I know those are high FODMAP, but it's also in tomatoes, it's in sweet corn, it's in peas. What else? Where was I going with this? And so where umami comes from is from glutamate, okay? And that's the G in MSG, but glutamate is actually an amino acid, and that is one of the building blocks of protein. So you may have heard or remembered from like science class that a protein, or a complete protein, is made up of all the amino acids, and glutamate is one of those. And for whatever reason, glutamate has a flavor, and foods that are high in glutamate are high in umami flavor. So that's all that's about. So other things that are high in umami besides some veggies are meat, and shellfish are really high, something like shrimp, clams. But the thing about umami is that raw meat doesn't really have umami flavor. You have to cook it in order to release that flavor, in order to sort of activate, you know, just to sort of transform the glutamate, the amino acid, to release this umami flavor. So that's why something that's been cooked for a long time, like a slow cooked roast or cured meat, like prosciutto, something like that, is higher in umami than just like a carpaccio, like a raw meat, or something that's just been like quickly grilled. So the longer the cooking, the more the flavor development, the more the umami comes out. And to try to bring this all back to FODMAPs, if you add a lot of umami ingredients to your recipes, and if you cook in a way that releases all this flavor from certain foods, you are not going to be stuck eating bland food, okay? So it's kind of a long story, and if you read my blog post, it will recap it, and I will go through a list of low FODMAP, high umami ingredients that you can add to recipes. And some of those things are like fish sauce, okay? I said shellfish is really high in umami, so there's fish sauce, there's anchovies, what else? Miso, things that are fermented, things that we kind of consider a little bit funky even, those are really high in umami. And when you kind of learn how to use them in your cooking, even soy sauce, because there's fermentation in that as well, when you learn to use them in your cooking, it can just lift all the other flavors. And think of a dish like spaghetti bolognese, okay? So this is a dish where there is kind of a slow-cooked meat sauce. So I said when you slow-cook meat, it brings out the umami. And tomatoes, it's cooked in tomatoes, right? And slow-cooked, like, or slow-roasted even, or sun-dried tomatoes are packed with umami. And then there's aged cheese. So I haven't even mentioned that one yet. Aged cheeses are full of umami, like Parmesan, Manchego. They're so addictively good because of this umami, right? So a dish like spaghetti bolognese, when you're layering the meat and the tomatoes and the cheese, it's like an umami explosion, and you don't need onion and garlic in there to have amazing flavor. So long story short, I am going to explain all this in my blog post and give you a bunch of examples and a bunch of cooking techniques to show you how to, you know, what you can do to foods and how you can cook them, how you can roast them, what kind of equipment to use to really release the umami in something. So for one example, okay, if you are making seared scallops, okay, if you don't wipe them or dry them very well and they're really wet and you put a whole bunch of them in your pan and the pan is really crowded, you get all this water and essentially they steam. So instead, you will make sure they're dry and you'll use a little oil and you won't crowd the pan, and that way you get browning and caramelization. And that's where the umami gets released. Anything where flavor gets a chance to develop and you get those reactions that cause browning, that's another good sign that you are releasing the umami. So I'll give you tips like that. All right, do you have any questions about what I'm talking about? I know it's kind of hard when you jump in kind of in the middle, but if you want to watch the beginning of this broadcast, you absolutely can, you know, in the Facebook group. But yeah, leave questions below afterwards if you have to go back and rewatch, and definitely make sure you're on the newsletter list. I will send out this blog post in the newsletter on Friday, and of course I'll put it on Facebook and all that jazz. But we're gonna end this debate about onion and garlic once and for all, because I tell you, I was devastated when I learned I should cut it out. And the other important thing to remember is that you only have to cut this out temporarily. There's a lot of us, and I know from myself and from clients I've worked with, that can reintroduce onion and garlic to our diet without any major symptoms. Some of us can eat just garlic, some can eat just onion, some can eat a little, some can eat a lot. It really depends, and you have to test and you have to reintroduce. But for the time that you are doing the FODMAP diet, even if it's just temporary, you need to know all these tips so that you don't feel deprived and that you're not dealing with bland food, and it doesn't even matter whether you use onion and garlic or not. All right, so I hope that helps, and I hope you'll check out the blog post when I get it up and get it out in the newsletter, and I hope you're having an awesome day, all right? Happy hump day. Happy Wednesday, all right? Thanks, guys. Bye.